All right, so let's talk about populations, audience. That's a big one. We just did a video recently on ABCD elements and we talked about audience, but we wanted to go into a little bit more detail about the parameters of audience, the importance of really figuring out who your audience is, why that's really critical. How do you do that? So let's just get started on that, Chuck. Why is it so important? Why do we need to drill it in everyone's head that this is a very important component of professionalized instructional design?
Well, I think one reason, Denise, that people have trouble with this is they think they already know these things. They think they know populations. They think they know who their audience is, who their learners are. And sometimes they do, let's be honest. I mean, there are times when that's the case. But if you're going into something cold as a designer, you're being dropped into a project or you've taken it on and you've got clients, you may or may not know this population. And you also have to think very seriously about the relationship between the content and the population, because there are contents that populations push back from, that don't want to be really involved in them, that you have to overcome issues of motivation and participation and other things. But on the other side of it, you really have to think about, okay, if you're going to set prerequisites, which we always talk about with design plans, okay, these are the expectations of people coming in. Can you reasonably expect these people to have certain things, certain knowledge, certain skills to be able to get started? And here's where you get one of those decision points as an instructional designer. Do I need more than one course? Because I got a population that is diverse enough that I need to address two different populations at the same time. Or I need to get a population up to speed to be able to get them into the second part, which is the core curriculum that we're talking about. So the things we want to think about, first of all, you have to establish what your expectations are for a population. What do they need to bring to a course? So what are the things that they'll need to bring? It may be language skills, right? And what is L1? Is it Spanish? Is it English? Is it Arabic? You know, it doesn't matter what it is, but you need to know what it is. And if you're going to put something out in different languages, then you got a whole different issue. I can remember a number of courses that I designed that went out 4, 5, 6 different languages. And you have to think about, okay, things that you don't think about other times. You know, one thing I learned very quickly was the pace of communications is different in different languages. So when I designed in Spanish, I had to think about at least doubling the amount of time that a course would take just in terms of going through it and presenting information. So like in a video, I just always figured it would take twice as long. And if you're doing translation and those kind of things, which we're not going to get into to any great degree, but these are things you have to think about. Okay, so think about language, think about education level if it's important. Okay, do they have the skills that we need for them to be able to read something or to be able to do something? So mathematics, do they have basic mathematics skills, which you will define what those are and ask them to demonstrate? So you think about prerequisites and you want to make sure you know what they are. You want to make sure that you've thought about this. And if it's certain skills, don't be afraid to say that. You need to be able to do these things. And one thing we found in apprenticeship was that apprentices coming in didn't have good math skills, and they would get into an apprenticeship and they would fall out of the apprenticeship because they couldn't do the math. And so when we established pre-apprenticeship programs, we put things like basic math in there, and you had to be able to go through and demonstrate a certain level of proficiency in basic math, like the big inch, 32nd of an inch. What does that mean to you as a carpenter or bricklayer? So there are things like that you need to be really clear about with that.
Yeah, we've seen that, like with certain organizations that you and I have both worked with. It's population is a very big thing, and in terms of their ability to do certain things, and having that, we talked about it in a past video, that sometimes it means breaking that up into having pre-workshops or pre-classes beforehand so that everybody's up to speed. Because if we're doing a class on, advanced PowerPoint slides to be able for train the trainer, and they need to be able to create PowerPoint slides, but they've never turned a computer on, they may need a a pre-course before that, a very basic computer course, so that they are not necessarily, we don't want them we don't want them failing, but we also don't want to be teaching to, that level in a class that's not supposed to be that level.
Yeah. And when we do forensics on programs and courses that don't work well, it almost always goes back to population issues. They either couldn't do the skills that we needed them to do going in, didn't have that skill level. Sometimes it's language, being able to do those things. But it goes back to this, what do they bring to this? And what are our expectations for that? And sometimes it does take another course. It takes a pre-course. It needs some kind of an intervention, pre-participation in the course you're designing to be able to do this. So
at the end of the day, the reason why we're doing this, the reason why we want to design professional designed courses is to bring the people who are in those courses up to speed. We want them to master the topic at hand. And if we are setting them up for failure by not analyzing who our audience is, we really are doing them a big disservice.
Yeah, and that happens. That's a real thing. And so as we go through the population issues you want to try to have a handle on quickly, another one is motivation. Do people want to be there? And what can you do about it when they don't? So 60, 70, 80% of things are mandated, certainly within a professional class of courses that we do for organizations. That people have to be there. And sometimes they want to be, most of the time they don't. I think it's a waste of time no matter what it is. And so what do you do about motivation? Do you upfront say, I know you don't want to be here, but we got to get through this together, which is what I typically design into a course. But there might be bigger issues there. It might be the fact that the pushback has nothing to do with the course or the content. It's just the fact that, okay, we're talking about, let's take a course in this software, but I don't have the software yet. I'm not getting it for another 6 months. Why am I here? Which is legitimate, right? Yeah.
I worked for a financial firm a long time ago, and that was the case. We were being trained on new software that we didn't even have in our computers and wouldn't have for a while. How am I going to apply that to my work life after this class? I'm going to forget everything that I learned. So it's making sure that they can have real world application. But what happens, Chuck? I mean, that is a legit question. A lot of people find themselves in that situation. What do you recommend when somebody finds themselves in a situation where that motivation is because maybe there's going to be a lack of being able to apply that in the real world, or maybe to me, that would be the biggest one, because you already address what you do when someone doesn't want to be there. It's, hey, look, let's just embrace the suck. You got to be here. We got to get through it. Let's figure this out.
Well, the other part of this, which is really important, Denise, is as an instructional designer and as a professional in the field, what you find is all of these clues that you're getting about things. So you get a population that's not going to be able to use this for 6 months or a year, and they don't really want to be there because they're not going to remember any of it. It's time for you as an instructional designer to talk to that organization and say, we need to push this back. This makes no sense for us to be able to do this if you get that kind of pushback. And that's part of the bigger field, is we're not just talking about specific courses all the time. We're talking about the whole environment learning takes place in. And if you have situations like this and you're seeing the pushback and motivation, or you're seeing it when you're doing focus groups or however you're doing your analytic work, and you find out we can cure this by just holding this off for 6 months or 3 months. Why do we need to do it now? And so there you get into the bigger part of instructional design, this holistic, this entire environment of learning that we need to be comfortable with. And when things aren't fitting, there's a reason they don't fit. If people aren't motivated, they don't want to be there, let's find out why. And if there's a way we can fix that, we can fix that. As you think about populations, if you can do it quickly in an op analysis, do it in 5 minutes, half an hour, whatever, that's terrific. But as I've said before in some of our videos, I've spent as long as 2 years just doing analysis and populations for a very large grant. That's not unusual at all. So when I was principal investigator for a DOL grant, 2 years looking at populations and could they really use this training program that was going to be brought out? Would it really make any difference? To what degree would it make a difference? Can we in any way try to quantify the difference it makes? And all this goes back to population. Who are these people? What will they be able to do realistically? And what will the outcome be with this group?
Yeah, it's good stuff. Very good stuff, Chuck. So, folks, if you have questions on population audience after you watch this video, if you're still maybe a little bit confused, drop a comment. We're happy to address it in a future video and then also right there in the comments. So go ahead and ask your questions. And yeah, we're here to help.